Hello, my friends, and welcome back to this session on the Gospel of John. This is session number 27, and Happy New Year to all of you who are hearing this, the first session of 2023. Thanks for coming back in. I took a little bit of a breather there in December. As you probably realize, December's a really busy month, and there's a lot going on. And I don't ever want to give less than good content. I don't want to ever give mediocre stuff. And so I would prefer, as a pastor and as a teacher, to kind of step away and give a little bit of a break before I'm going to put out mediocre content. So I did that, but we're back here now. It's 2023, and we're into a new year. A new year, new us, new life, new vision as we move forward. So it's great to be back. It's great to be back on the microphone. It's great to be back in your presence. Thank you for participating in this. Thank you for being part of this. It is only, for me, if I'm just out there doing something, if I'm just out there talking into a microphone, it really doesn't mean anything unless people are paying attention, unless people are listening. So if you're listening out there, then thank you. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for being part of the journey. I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing. If you're joining us for the first time, then welcome. Welcome to the journey. Welcome to the sessions. We've been at it now for a while. So I certainly would encourage you to go back and listen to the previous sessions. Not that you have to do that now. You can certainly engage in this moment and dwell with us in this moment. You don't have to go back, but I definitely would encourage you to go back and listen to the previous sessions. Follow along where we've come. This is definitely a journey that we started at the beginning and we continue to work on now through up to this point. If you've been journeying with us up to this point, then welcome back. Thanks for coming back in. Thanks for rejoining the conversation, for rejoining the dialogue. I know that, I kind of disappeared there for a while, and but like I said, I needed to focus on other things, but here we are back to it. So I would encourage you to have a Bible open in front of you, have a Bible open so that you can follow along, so that you can see the words. I truly do believe that one of our challenges as modern day believers, we're so inundated with information that we're not steeped in the Word. We're not spending enough time really literally reading and following along. So I definitely would encourage you to get in the Word. Get in the text, get in the Scriptures, follow along, read the words as I read them so that you've got something to focus on, so that you've got something, so that you know what's being said. And you know where to find it. I think the other intimidating thing for a lot of people is they just don't know where things are at in the Bible, so they won't open their mouths. They won't say anything about the Bible because they don't know where things are at in the Bible. This is a great way to learn where things are at. This is a great way to study and get into it. So definitely have a Bible open before you follow along. I don't care whether it's a translation or a paraphrase, whether you're using the Message or if you're using the NIV or the Good News Bible. I use the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, because that's not only the version that is used for the lectionary, but it's also the version that I'm familiar with. I have my preaching Bible, my study Bible is all marked up and broken up and duct taped together because I've used it for years to do all kinds of different studies. So it's the Bible that I know. It's the Bible that I'm comfortable with. Again, and that's not to say that my comfort is at the utmost, but this is what I'm working with. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay to own your comforts from time to time. It's okay to say that this is what I'm going to focus on. This is what I'm working with. So I would encourage you, whatever you have, whether it's a digital version or a printed version, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And the nice thing about our reality is that you can have, multiple screens open. You can have a digital version of the Bible open in one tab while you have this playing in another tab. And if you are looking at a digital version, then I would encourage looking at BibleGateway.com, which is a very comprehensive biblical website that has so many different translations of the Bible. And just about every language you could certainly look for, it has a translation of the Bible to be found there. So BibleGateway.com if you need a place to go for a Bible translation. But once again, welcome to you. So we're in chapter 9. Chapter 9 is this long story about the blind man. The blind man who Jesus gives his sight. And, not necessarily to recap, but the blind man doesn't come to Jesus seeking sight. But the disciples see him and they say, who sinned? His father, he did. Jesus says nobody sinned. This isn't how it works. He's blind so that he could receive the glory of God, so that he could bear the glory of God. And that's what happens. Jesus heals him, gives him his sight back. He's drawn before the Pharisees. The Pharisees question him. Now, the biggest challenge is, and I've said this before, Jesus, they want to discredit Jesus. They want to discredit the work that he's doing. They want to make him look like a fool. Because if they make him look like a fool, then the people are going to stop following him. And if the people stop following him, then they start following the Pharisees. And if they start following the Pharisees, then, well, life is good, because then they don't have to worry about going back to anything else or have to worry about their power being threatened. And my dear friends, let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. The Pharisees, and I don't want to I don't want to sound like I'm throwing the Pharisees under the bus. Because it happens, when you're incorporated in a system long enough, sooner or later, you so desire to protect the system that you miss when the system needs to change. We've seen that throughout history, where a system has created power for a group of people, and that group of people doesn't want to give up power. So they'll do everything in their capability and everything in their possibility to keep the system the same way that it was, even if that means undoing that which is really necessary. And here's the Pharisees. They're undoing the work of God because they're undoing the work of the Messiah, not because they're opposed to the work of the Messiah per se, but they're opposed to losing their own power. So they need to do whatever they can to discredit this Jesus. But in the meantime, this Jesus keeps doing more and more to show his credibility in the face of the world. And this is becoming more and more of a challenge. And today, as we continue on in the 9th chapter of the Gospel of John, that's what we get. We get this challenge for the Pharisees because Jesus has healed a blind man, somebody that everybody knows is blind. And we actually just finished up the last session where his parents came along, and his parents came along to verify that he was blind. They brought his parents in to make sure that he was blind. And sure enough, his parents say, look, we know it's our son. We know he was born blind. How he got his sight, we don't know. We don't know what happened, just that we know he was born blind and now he can see. Anything else on top of that, that's outside of our realm of knowledge. You got to talk to him about that because we don't know anymore. He's of age, ask him. Now, I guess, you could, he says he's of age, so that would make him at least, now we don't know how old he is because the Gospels don't tell us, but if he was of age, if he was of legal age, that would make him at least 14, okay? 14 years old, give or take, at least. So to put up the charade of being blind for 14 years, just to then pull this magic trick, at least 14 years. Like I said, it could have been up to 30 or 35 years. We don't know the time thing. But the point I'm trying to make is this. The idea that he would be faking it for all this time is just, it's insane. It's unacceptable. It would be unbelievable. There are certain things in our brain that we respond to automatically. I mean, if someone throws something at your head, you will automatically defend yourself. You have to think not to. So a blind person, if someone throws a ball and it's going to hit a blind person's head, they're not going to defend themselves because their brain doesn't see it, okay? So there's no way that someone could have lied about that until they came of age. And that's what the parents are saying. Look, he's of age. Ask him. They've already asked him. They bring his parents in. So they're going to ask him again. That's what we pick up. This is chapter 9, verse 24. So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did you do? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I've told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. They answered him, "You are born entirely in sin, and are you trying to teach us?" And they drove him out. All right, so they bring him in a second time. They bring him in a second time for this conversation. They want to re-question him. Now, this is classic interrogation technique. Classic interrogation technique, because what they're looking for is they're looking for any kind of variation in the story. So they question him, they get his story, they send him away, and then they bring him back and question him again. They're looking for any variation in the story. They want to find any little thing that's different, because if they can find any little thing that's different, then perhaps maybe they can convince or prove that this is all a hoax or a trick or a lie, and that the people don't have to believe it. And if the people don't have to believe it, then the Pharisees don't have to lose their power. You see where this is going. You see what happens here. And really, I think at the end of the day, the Pharisees aren't looking for truth. They're not looking to find out whether Jesus is the Messiah or not. They're just looking to shut him up. They're looking to get rid of him. Now, this is a dangerous game. And it's a dangerous game because, well, Jesus is the Messiah. And if he's the Messiah, if he is the one sent from God, as Gamaliel will later say to the Sanhedrin, actually, he would have said to the Sanhedrin before the writing of this, if it's of human hands, it'll fall under its own weight. But if it's of God, then there's no way we can stop it. That's what Gamaliel says. And it's so true. So vastly true. So here is the Pharisees trying to find where this man lies, where this man, maybe his details are wrong, or maybe he missed something here or there, so they can trip him up. And therefore, to trip him up, they get to trip Jesus up. That's what they're trying to do. That's the whole point of this exercise. That's why they're doing it again. That's why they're asking him again, a second time, to say what he had said before. They want him to answer again, so that when he answers a second time, perhaps, maybe he will answer differently, and they can hang him on his lack of continuity. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for a lack of continuity from the blind man, and the blind man doesn't give it to him. Because the fact is, the Pharisees are making assumptions here, and he is not. What do they say? Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. Well, we don't know whether this man is a sinner. We assume this man is a sinner. We're trying to convince everybody this man is a sinner, so they stop following him. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to convince these people not to follow Jesus. They don't know whether he's a sinner or not, and it doesn't really matter whether he's a sinner or not. What matters is that he's disrupting the status quo, and they want to get rid of him. They want to stop it. So we know this man is a sinner. And look, my friends, I know that and I don't want to sound anti-Semitic. This is not an anti-Jewish thing. This is an anti-power thing. And I know that there would be those who would argue that the Pharisees are acting in the best interest of the whole. I would disargue that. I would not argue that the Pharisees are acting in the best interest of the whole. The Pharisees stopped acting in the best interest of the whole a long time before this event happened, which is why Jesus had to come along. The Pharisees are acting in the best interest of the Pharisees and those who maintain power. That's what we're seeing here, friends. This is not the Pharisees doing what's right for the whole. This is the Pharisees doing what's right for the Pharisees. And I'm just putting it out there. I'm sure there are probably those who would argue against it, and that's fine. If you want to argue against it, then I'm happy to listen. But this is a pure power play, and we've seen it again throughout history, over and over. The Pharisees are trying to trip up the blind man by making conclusions about Jesus that are untrue. We know them to be untrue. They say, we know he's a sinner. Well, you don't even know where he comes from. How can you know he's a sinner? And that's what the blind man says. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. One thing I do know, I was blind, now I see. Blind, and now I see. That's what I know. And the blind man, again, we don't even know his name, so I keep calling him the blind man. The blind man goes with the facts, the knowledge. What do I know? I don't know whether he's a sinner or not, but what I do know is that I was blind and now I see. What I do know is that he gave me my sight back. That's what I know. That's all that I know. I don't know whether he's a sinner or not. I'm concluding that he's not a sinner, but I don't know that for sure. So the Pharisees go back to it. They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" Answer the question again. Tell us the story again. Tell us over and over. Tell us the narrative. Let's look for the places where you get it wrong. But he doesn't. He's like, I don't have to tell you. I've already told you. I've already told you what he did. Now, notice this to be true. This man's probably going to get kicked out of the synagogue, but his life's not going to be in danger. They're not going to execute him because he got his sight back. So it's not like he is afraid of criminal retribution. He's not. He's not afraid of criminal retribution. So he says, I've told you already, and you wouldn't listen. What's gonna make it any different this time if I tell you another time? Are you gonna listen now? I don't think so. That's what he says. I don't think so. I told you already, and you don't listen. So why should I tell you again? Do you also want to become his disciples? Are you looking to follow him? Now, here's the thing. Now, again, we don't know much about the blind man. He could be very smart. He could be very dumb, ignorant. He could be a jerk. We don't know. But this statement is actually a really good kind of needle. You keep asking about this guy. Do you want to follow him? I mean, it's a great kind of little nudge into the Pharisees, kind of a little poke in the kidney, if you will, that is meant to kind of ire them up. Which is what it does, because really, quite frankly, they're not going to listen to him anyway. So you might as well kind of poke the bear a little bit if you want a vision. So, then they come back. You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. You are the one following him, but we're the ones following Moses. We're the ones in the right. That's the statement. We follow Moses. We're the ones in the right. You're the one following him, and you're in the wrong. Well, if being wrong means you get your sight after being born blind, well, then count me in the wrong. I think the biggest challenge with this statement is that they're arguing metaphysical when this guy was born blind and now he has his sight back. This guy is a walking physical proof of the power of God manifest in Jesus Christ. And he's like, look, I mean, you can be disciples of Moses all you want, but this is new stuff. This is a new revelation of God. And that's what he says. He said, you know what? We know where Moses comes from, but we don't know where this guy comes from. And since we don't know where he comes from, we're not going to follow him. We're not going to own him. We're not going to say that he is part of the tribe. That's what we're talking about here, folks. We're talking about, Jesus. We don't know where he comes from, which is part of the messianic prophecy, which is kind of funny because in the messianic prophecy as given by Isaiah, that's part of being the Messiah. Part of being the Messiah is unknown origins. He will come from unknown origins. So the Pharisees are, by their own confession, identifying a part of the messianic prophecy. But in doing so, they're literally taking that part of the messianic prophecy and using it as an argument against Jesus, not an argument for him, which is fascinating. They're using it as an argument against Jesus, not an argument for him. But that is one of the foundational pieces of the Messiah, is coming from unknown origins. So we don't know where he comes from. We know where Moses comes from, so we're going to follow what we know. We're going to follow what we know. How classic, conservative human behavior. We're going to follow what we know, even if what we know is going to lead us down the road of destruction. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Plato's allegory of the cave. And basically Plato's allegory of the cave, or the parable of the cave, talks about humanity's own imprisonment, humanity's own shackles. So the allegory of the cave is basically Plato saying that there are people, they are chained in a cave, they're facing away from the opening, chained down on their knees. And then one day, someone comes along and removes the chains. Well, then the people get up from their position and they walk out to the mouth of the cave and they see everything going on. Now, all they've seen up to that point was the shadows. All they saw were the shadows on the wall. And they didn't know what the shadows were. When they get out into the world and see what the shadows are, they go back and kneel down in place. The allegory of the cave is that we are imprisoned by what we know. We are imprisoned by our own comfort, even if that comfort is going to kill us or enslave us. And that's what's happening with the Pharisees. The Pharisees are enslaved by their own comfort. And so the very piece of the messianic prophecy that the Messiah comes from unknown origins, they're denying. They're using it as a negative and not as a positive, which is so against the whole point of the prophecy. Okay, so we know where Moses comes from. We know that God spoke through Moses. We don't know about this man. We don't know where he comes from. We don't know his origin story, which means that we can't verify that God is speaking to him. And the blind man comes back with a great retort. He comes back with, again, this is what happens when you focus on the facts, focus on the truth. He comes back and says, here's an astonishing thing. You don't know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So the very argument, the very basis of purity and sinlessness that the Pharisees used to identify their own power, to keep their own power, he is throwing back in their face. He's throwing back in their face. You don't know where he comes from, messianic prophecy. But we know that God doesn't listen to sinners. Yeah, I mean, that's very Old Testament purity laws. Now, we, in the revelation of Jesus Christ, we know that God does listen to us as sinners. We hope and pray and trust that God listens to us as sinners, my God. But he says, we know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but we also know that God listens to one who worships him and obeys his will. So it's not like God doesn't listen to anybody. No, the statement is God doesn't listen to sinners, but God does listen to those who obey him. God does listen to those who pay attention. God does listen to those who care for him. That's the statement. That's the whole thing that we depend on. And so we know this to be the case. We know that God listens to these people. We know that God listens to this. And never in the world, never since the world has begun, and this is so true, never since the world has begun has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. Born blind. This is very different from being stricken blind or being, blindness coming from disease or curse or what have you. No, this is a statement to say that this person was born with either no eyes or malformed eyes of some way. So this isn't like Paul, who was blinded for 3 days with the scales on his eyes. No, this is born blind. This is eyes need to be corrected, born blind. And that is what Jesus does. So it's not just giving a blind man his sight. It's about giving a blind man born from birth, blind from birth, his sight. So, if this man were not from God, he could do nothing. I mean, it's only if we're going to argue, that only God has the power to create, that creation comes from God's hands, which is what the Pharisees would argue, that creation comes from God's hands. If only God has the power to create, then only God has the power to recreate, then only God has the power to fix a broken portion of creation. The devil doesn't have the power to do that. Humans don't have the power to do that. Trust me, if we did, we'd already do it. The cross would have been unnecessary if we could fix things on our own. We can't. It's about God. So here is this man born blind saying, look, we know that nobody can do anything like this outside of God's presence. So how can this person not be from God? How can you say this person is a sinner, kicked out, blah, 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 when it's not true? Nobody can do this stuff apart from God. So if nobody can do this stuff apart from God, here this person is doing it. Conclusion, he is from God. Good deductive reasoning. Nobody has the power of God outside the presence of God. This guy has the power of God, so therefore this guy is not outside the presence of God. This guy is in the presence of God. That is the conclusion. That is what we're working with here. And again, we don't know much about the blind man. He could be a very smart person. He could just be a very wise person. Well, I mean, I guess when you've been walking around all your life blind, you figure out a lot of things, and then someone comes along and gives you your sight back. It doesn't take much to figure out that, this is a pretty cool guy. It's a pretty important guy. So that's his answer. And what do the Pharisees do? What do the Pharisees do? The Pharisees, they pull a perfect ad hominem argument. Anybody know what an ad hominem argument is? When you attack the human. Ad hominem, attack human. When you go after the human, when you go after the person. So they can find no flaw in his argument. They can find no flaw in his argument at all. They can find no way to argue against him. So what do? They attack him. You are born entirely in sin, and are you trying to teach us? Well, yeah, because you're dumb would be a good answer, but that's not what he says. But so he is spot on, locked down into an argument, and they're losing. The Pharisees see no way to win, so what do? They attack him. They attack him. He was born blind, minding his own business, wasn't seeking out any kind of healing. Jesus comes along, heals him, gives him his sight back, and now the people of God are kicking him out. I mean, it's really kind of fascinatingly funny and awful all at the same time. But that's what they're doing. They're kicking him out. They're like, you know what? You got to go now. We don't want you around here anymore. It's amazing. It really, truly is amazing that they go down that road. But they do. They kick him out. They revile him. They drive him out of the synagogue. Nothing like having your day completely torn apart. Not only do you get your sight for the first time, you probably alienated your parents, and you get kicked out of the synagogue. You know, it's kind of fascinating when God moves in your life, because when God moves in your life, usually a lot of things happen. A lot of things change. People like status quo. They like the people bent down in the cave. When God moves in our life, we don't stay in the cave anymore. And people who want us in the cave, they either try to push us back down or they just take off. That's just how it works. So here's this blind man who's leveling up against the Pharisees, and showing them the weakness of their logic, and they kick him out. They run him away. So let's see what happens to this poor guy who now probably doesn't have any parents who want to talk to him and isn't allowed in the synagogue anymore. So this is verse 35. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, him being the blind man. When Jesus found the blind man, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I may believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have not sinned. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." So Jesus isn't going to leave this guy. Okay, remember back in the early part of the story when the disciples asked Jesus, who sinned, this man or his parents? Remember, Jesus said, neither this man nor his parents. This man was born blind so that God's glory would be revealed. Remember that conversation? Right. So now that the man has been born blind so that God's glory will be revealed, what we get is now the end where that glory is truly revealed. Jesus isn't going to leave him. Jesus can be like, "Oh, well, okay, you're done now. Have a nice day. Good luck." No, Jesus seeks him for being driven out. Now, there's a little bit going on here. Jesus isn't just going to be like, "Hey, dude, I'm the one that healed you." He's like, "Hey, do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe that God has come to earth?" Well, the blind man has already professed this, okay? The blind man has already professed this, but here's the deal. Remember, we're made aware of it because we read it in the story. We're there, but there's nothing to indicate that Jesus would have heard this dialogue, this conversation. There's nothing to indicate that Jesus would have been... Now, we know that Jesus can lean into the hearts of people and even the lives of people. We've seen that already. But Jesus isn't looking to... This isn't a trick question. Jesus wants to know, do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe in the one who has the power of God in this world today? And the guy's like, something incredible happened here to me today, dude. So this morning, probably not, but now, yeah, I'm down. So tell me who this guy is that I may believe. Tell me who's the one that will heal me. Remember, he didn't know, per se. I mean, he did see Jesus, but it was very brief, and there was a lot going on. So he didn't necessarily get a good look at Jesus, and that's kind of the long and the short of it. I remember he went to the pool and he washed, and he went to the pool of Siloam and washed, and when he washed, he came back and was able to see. So he didn't get it. He didn't get a good look at Jesus. He just heard his voice. So he comes back. Jesus calls him out. Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is the Son of Man? Who is this? Who is this God walking the earth? This pure man, the one that he just professed before the Pharisees. Jesus says, I'm he. I'm the man. I'm the one. I'm the one to whom has done all of this. The one you're speaking with. I'm the Son of Man. And this is something pretty rare, that Jesus actually owns this identity this way. Usually Jesus doesn't do that. Usually Jesus doesn't own the identity. He's usually a little bit more obtuse about it. He says, I'm the Son of Man. I'm the one that you're looking for. And he's like, I believe. Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. And Jesus said, look, I came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind. All right, so here's the thing. Back in the early part of the world, he says, I didn't come into the world to judge the world. We need to be clear. Jesus isn't saying I came in the world to judge the world. I came into the world because judgment is coming on the world. Judgment is going to happen. At some point, we see in the scriptures, judgment is going to happen at some point. Sooner or later, judgment will happen. We will all stand before it. Jesus wants to make sure that everybody has the right. Those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. So those who are ignorant to the ways of God, that their sight may be given, that ignorance may be taken away, that God's way in the world may be shown. That's important. Jesus has come so that God's way is going to be revealed. That's why he's come into the world. That's what we want. Jesus, has revealed God's way to us. That's the whole point of the revelation, of the incarnation. Yes, Jesus does some really cool things, like give this blind man his sight back, but not because the man was blind, but because God's glory needed to be revealed. The man getting his sight back is secondary. Jesus wanted to reveal the glory of God. That's the point. The secondary point is the man gets his sight back. Woohoo! It's awesome. All right. But also that those who see may become blind, that those who see that aren't seeing the work of God, that aren't truly seeing God. And that's the Pharisees. The Pharisees see, but they don't see God working. They see power. They see corruption. They see Jesus getting in the way. They see Jesus needing to be driven out. They don't see God working. They need to be blinded. They need to have what they're seeing taken away so that they can be shown the true light of God, the true path of God. In order to see the truth, we have to be blinded to the lies, to the corruption. And that's what Jesus is saying. I know it's kind of metaphysical, metaphorical, but it's true. If we want to see something new, we have to become blinded to what we're already seeing. Because if we don't, then all we're going to do is see what we're already seeing. That's the whole point. That's why, like a horse has blinders on. The whole point of the blinder is so that the horse looks in a particular direction. Because if a horse looks another way, they're going to be distracted. So Jesus says, look, I've come into the world because judgment is coming. And everybody deserves the chance, here we go, everybody deserves the chance to hear about the Word of God on earth. Everybody deserves the chance to hear about the Word of God in this world. I've come to give sight to the blind. I've come to share God's promise to those who have not yet received it. Like this blind man, who, for all intents and purposes, probably is not allowed in the synagogue because he's blind. And I've also come to show those who think they know what they're talking about that they don't. That blindness is really where they're at. Those who say that they see, they need to see their blindness. And the Pharisees say, surely we are not blind, are we? Well, if you can't figure out what Jesus is truly talking about, then yeah, you are blind. And that's what he says. Yeah, you're blind. You're blind to this whole thing. You don't see what's going on. Your sight remains. Your sin remains because you think you have it all together. You want to silence me as the manifestation of God in the world because I'm not saying what you want me to say. you're not willing to see what I'm doing. You're just willing to see the power that you're losing. So yeah, I'm going to say that you're pretty blind, but you're not willing to admit it. So your sight remains, and because your sight remains, so does your sin. So this is the glory of God revealed, and this is how God works in the world. We as believers today, we have to be very clear that God's revelation continues to come to us. We cannot just sit back and say, you know what, I learned this, I got it 20 years ago, I'm just going to ride the wave. No, that's not how it works. We are continually being revealed, and God is continually being revealed to us over and over, and we have to be willing to accept that and hear that and move through that. And if we can't, then we have a situation, we have an issue, something that we have to confront and face and deal with. So, even in ourselves, oftentimes, my friends, we can be far more the Pharisee than the blind man. We can be far more the one thinking we've got it figured out and looking at our own power being questioned than we are the one who has our sight opened up. We've been given sight. We've been given the vision and the option of God, and we continue to strive to have it revealed more fully to us. All right, my friends, I'm going to leave it there today. Gosh, it's good to be back. Thanks for tuning in. It's great to be here. It's great to be part of the dialogue once again. If you have any questions or any comments, my contact information is going to pop up at the end of the session. I'd be happy to, welcome you to reach out to me. Or if you have something else, if you want me to touch on something I didn't touch on real well, then hey, let me know. I'll be happy to do it. You have any questions? Reach out to me. You can go through my YouTube page, which is where you're hearing this, or you can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, or contact me through the church website, livingbody.org. However you can, And look, if you're following this and this is good, and you're finding this is good stuff, look, this is one of the easiest ways we can do evangelism. Share it out there. All you got to do is share it. Share it out on your timeline. Share it out on your page. If you have a YouTube channel, subscribe to me. Get me connected to your subscribers. Whatever it is, get it out there. Because this is how the word grows. God built the church organically. God never intended the church to be the one that goes out, the institution that be the one to go out and proclaim the gospel. God intended the people, you and me. And this is one of the ways you can do it. Share it. Email it to a friend. Message it to a friend. Message the series to a friend. Put it out there on your timeline, whatever. But get the word out there. We are bearers of this light. And in this Christmas